Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with Andre, and I got some questions for Andre. We need to learn some things about air defense and missiles and drones and all that kind of stuff. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with Andrei Martyanov. And before we get going, just so you'll know, a very important blog that you need to go to on a regular basis, Reminiscence of the Future. There you see all the stuff happening. You can go there and you can see all of Andrei's appearances on different places, different just things that he has, stuff that he's written, all of that. So, and here's something very important. Buy me a coffee. As I always say, the people that do, everybody in alternative media, they're not paying us $30,000 a show like Rachel Maddow, and these websites, everything has to come out of our own pocket. So buy me a coffee or two if you can support Andre, and of course all of his books. Look right down the side, his great books. And America's Final War, is that the newest one?
Yeah, that's the latest. Yeah,
there you go. That's the one you want to get, America's Final War. Now there's plenty other ones. There, Losing Military Supremacy, that's another great one, but Reminiscence of the Future, and of course his Smoothie X12, which is his YouTube channel. Lots of good stuff. Always you always got to check out all of his latest shows. All right, Andre, let's talk something interesting. When I first paid any attention at all to military technology was 1991, right? So 91, they attack, they invade, was it 91? Yes, the whole Iraq Kuwait thing. And that's the first we see of, quote, the term we heard was smart bombs. Mm-hmm. And now they've got lasers and they're showing it. Oh, we put it right in this window and it was a big deal, right? And I came to find out later that like 99% of the bombs that they dropped were dumb bombs, but that was, public relations stuff to show the great technology that they had. Now it appears to me that in reality, all of this money spent on missiles and smart bombs and all these things, air defense, missiles, and drones, that's modern warfare. If you don't have the first two, air defense and missiles, if your air defense and missiles are not up to par, you have lost the war. And from the looks of the things, drones, you can buy those on the drones are very they're cheap. Anybody can make them. So while they're a valuable tool, they're easily acquired. Air defense and missiles seems to me that's the area where the West is in deep and serious trouble, as we've seen in the Red Sea. And that's where their military supremacy right now, above all, seems to be in. They're taking a back seat basically right now to Russia. Anyway, your thoughts on air defense and missiles and the role that it plays in modern warfare?
Well, I need to make one note, though, and this is extremely important, and I wrote about it. The first massive use of smart munition, which are TV, laser guided, and not only that, the radar guided essentially also is a smart munition, but it was in mass used in Afghanistan, but not American Afghanistan, Soviet Afghanistan, early 80s, and Russians were running there. And fact is, what many people do not understand, which I went through, the digitalization of the Soviet defense ministry, so to speak, or the armed forces, was in full swing, actually. And yes, this was, for example, a very important part of the developing of the new fighting concepts, which were developed by the Soviet military thinkers. So, but as you know, Russians suck at PR, okay? And there was there was no CNN to show it. So anyhow, but yeah, again, the people have to understand that the modern drones, there are drones of the tactical, battlefield tactical level drones, FPVs. You stick the grenade on it, or you stick several of them, and you fly them in, or you stick the RPG with the tandem charge, as many people saw on the video, and you fly them in. You can hit their armor. But of course, these are relatively simple. You have all kinds of guidance, either purely radio, or they use, of course, the good old, by the way, since 1960s, wire, well, fiber optics guidance. Before that, it was purely wire, for example, like on the first Soviet ATGMs, anti-tank guided missiles. Today, it's primarily fiber optics. But there is another thing, and what many people begin to kind of lose on that. Well, definitely you can kill, for example, vehicle, okay, or you can kill people, which sadly you can see all this over the internet. All videos are available. But the next up is, of course, the very serious technological thing, which is, for example, like Zala's Lancet, which is not exactly, well, it's drone if you wish, but it is loitering munition. Those guys can kill anything. And obviously, they are more expensive than FPV drones, which you can buy basically in Costco. And now Ukrainians, due to the lack of artillery, they just still have some left, but they primarily print them, 3D print them at the front, well, which they have near the front line. So, and well, this one probably, can take a little bit of the, a few grenades. And there are loitering munitions are already different type of things. And then, of course, now the next up, which is, of course, what many people see sometimes, but they do not recognize what they are seeing. They are seeing what is, well, medium endurance, really large drones, which are becoming essentially small aircraft, real aircraft. And they loiter there for hours, actually. They provide not only recon, they provide guidance, they illuminate with laser or their target, and they are networked. Russians, for example, are like this with Ukrainians. Russians already use swarms. They are controlled. They are what many people wrongly would say, oh, artificial intelligence. It's not artificial intelligence. These are large data sets controlled by the very sophisticated algorithms. It has nothing to do with, Skynet and, no, it's not self-aware, but yes, they do drones, and those drones, which are intertwined into the overall command and control and strike systems of the battlefield, including the operational rear. Those are already very serious ones. And then, of course, the highest of them, one of which Russians lost relatively recently, it's S-70 Охотник, which is the jet-powered stealth, state-of-the-art machine, which can carry, it can fight a dogfight if need be. It is controlled in a swarm. It itself can control the swarm of drones, which have been already performed, but it can also what is called the dedicated wingman. So, for example, when you have a Su-35 and a Su-57, you can have several of those S-70s flying in company with you as a tactical unit. And they can perform some really deep penetration tasks, and they can fly for 1,000 miles, So that's what we have. And when you look attentively at this whole spread, so to speak, it's a real variety, but it is organic development of the means of the delivery, essentially, and of course of the recon. Again, many people do not know that it was called Tupolev. Good Lord, what Tupolev 400, blah, blah, blah. It was called race with literally flight, called, when you say flight number, that's what race in Russian. That was jet powered, and it flew first in like early 1960s. Obviously, it had it wasn't as sophisticated as modern ones. It was just flew a straight line, but collecting the visual data, so to speak, from the camera, could turn around and fly back and deliver this. But it was in gestation and delivery for a while now. But in the end, what many people didn't see, and it's being used now, there are no anti-drone technologies. The same Zala and other corporations in Russia already not only presented, it's serially produced. You have anti-drone drones. Okay, they hunt other drones. So what you have essentially a replaying of the air warfare, but on the lower level with the unmanned systems. So, and if you look attentively at all that, that essentially, different iteration of the what used to be air power, So, but, and here comes that you're absolutely correctly stated. You don't have air defense, it doesn't matter what you have, okay? It doesn't matter. Just to demonstrate to you, which I remember those guys said, oh, Israel shut down something like 100, Iranian drones, which, by the way, have been launched specifically to be shut down. To basically, so, I mean, those morons from CNN and establishment media, they have no clue what they're talking about. But yesterday, 524 drones flew into Russia. All of them have been shut down. And we're talking about including drones which are on the base of, for example, the Eastern European knockoff of Cessna, whatever the most popular Cessna, and all kinds of them, and including obviously cruise missiles, including HIMARS, including what have you, all of them have been shut down. So some people are in Pentagon are just scratching their head, because, and it is known fact, it's not some kind of, me, getting into this Russian rah-rah thing or something. Numbers are there. And actually, our relatives who live, one of our relatives, we spoke about with them yesterday. They live in their, they have the dacha in the suburb of Moscow. They say, yeah, it's the kids are scared because they can hear constantly either Panzer or even helicopters shoot it down, and they can hear obviously work of their artillery and launch of their missiles. And even when Panzer or Tor they launch missile, it's loud. Okay, let me tell you, that thing is. I mean, you can hear it. Okay, so but yeah, they haven't been able to penetrate, and this is like shocking for many of them. It has been a shock for NATO since that, until of course when they stopped consuming completely these fairy tales from Kiev regime, and they say, oh God, we cannot break through. Well, yeah, of course you can't. That it was designed for decades to fight everything NATO can throw at them.
Well, let me ask you this. One of the things that I've seen in recent, over the last couple of years is this: the U.S. has various, and the U.S. and NATO has various air defense systems. But it seems to me that the old S-300s are better than any of them. The old S-300s from the 1980s seem to be better than anything that the West has today. Why is that? Why is it that the Russian systems, even the older S-300s, but not, I understand, and a lot of people don't know this, they're variations of S-300s, S-300P, and blah, 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 and on and on and on. So S-300 is a series. It could be old or new, or and my understanding is the S-400 is actually a new designation, a new generation of the S-300. But at any rate, why is it that these older S-300s are still better than anything that NATO's been able to put on the battlefield, or so it seems?
Well, doctrinal and empirical things combined. For example, Russians, Red Army, for example, ended in 1945, and Red Air Force was the largest tactical operational air force in history. Everybody thinks that, it's United States and Western allies, they had the largest strategic bomber force, but in terms of numbers. And then of course Russians knew that, these guys, they believed that they literally won everything. As we already know, Trump already stated that it was United States which won all of it, including defeating the aliens from the planet Zoltar. But the question was that, we know they are having a huge emphasis on the Air Force, okay? Because they had this natural tendency, especially for the United States. It came naturally historically that, here's Air Force, here's the obviously naval part of it, which are, of course, U.S. Navy had an enormous number of the aircraft carriers by the end of the World War II. And theoretically at that time, especially due to the weakness of the Soviet Navy, they can theoretically go in and essentially bomb pretty much, whatever they wanted, in the coastal areas. So what are you going to do with this? Well, you begin to create not only a rebuild Red Air Force, on the new technological foundation, which of course was jet age, but you begin to build air defense complexes. You begin to heavily invest in that, and then suddenly what you have the Vietnam War, and then you begin to throw in those S-75s there, and they begin to perform brilliantly. Actually, they begin to shoot down. American sources say that it was 850, around 850 combat aircraft, not helicopters, shot down by S-75s, by missiles. But then, of course, Russians say, well, wait a minute, it was more than that. We shut down, because the only part where there were Soviet advisors in Vietnam was air defense. There was no Soviet pilots, unlike it was in Korea, who flew, no, but air defense, yes. So there was a lot of Russian Soviet military advisors there. So say up to 2,000 combat aircraft have been shot down by. So what you have an enormous data set on performance of your technology, on the training, on the doctrine, and you begin to put it together. And then, of course, you have obviously Arab-Israeli wars, and you have 1973. And guess what? Air defense again performed. Israel lost 103 aircraft to the Soviet missiles. So it's like they were bleeding. I mean, plain and simple. So despite the fact that Arabs successfully lost it, as they usually do, and nothing personal against Arabs per se. I mean, there are many wonderful people among them, and so, but they just not good for fighting the combined arms. So, but Soviet advisors again have been part of it, and so Israel learned the hard way that you don't go there. And as a result, you have this complex of the electronic warfare and air defense systems, which are based on the real combat experience with enormous data set, which develops it. And as the result, by 1980s, the first S-300s come out, and everybody gasps at that time. Okay.
What was the big jump? What was the big difference in technology? What could the because I know they had an S-200 at some point, but what did set the S-300 apart in technology from everything that was available at that time?
S-200 already was a very big deal. And especially, do not forget, Russians were the Soviets were the first ones who actually shot down S-25 in 1961 ballistic missile, and I mean intercontinental ballistic missile, not some kind of tactical ballistic missile. It was like wow, So
and they shot down that spy plane, the American spy plane.
Oh yeah, that was that were first iterations of S-75, and okay. But these were like some shocking developments, which, for example, the NATO side didn't expect. So they started coming up with all kinds of things, trying to, for example, they say, okay, the first versions of Patriot, the original Patriot, it didn't compare well with S-300, but they say, oh, it has longer range. Well, you know what? It depends on how successful you are at the longer range. And the point with the Soviet systems, S-200 had a very long range, but it was pretty cumbersome. It was very dangerous. It actually shot down one of the American planes at Libya during the Libyan. It was shot down by Libyans, not by Soviets. But it shot down one of the Air Force, I believe.
What did they shoot down? Didn't they shoot down when they were bombing? Was it Bosnia or something? They shot down some of those stealth fighters.
Oh no, it was the good old S-75 by Serbs. They shut down F-117.
Yeah.
So it's and what many people do not understand, the air defense comes not just because missiles. It comes with the combat battle management systems, and it comes with the radar and other sensors which have to be developed. And what many people do not know that, and this is it's for some people, it's just like, are you kidding me? Well, Russians have been leading radar development since hell knows when, precisely because of the weakness, for example, of the Soviet Navy after World War II. What do? How do you deal with the overwhelming power of the U.S. Navy and its carrier force, which was Well, you begin to build submarines and you begin to invent actually cruise missiles, anti-shipping cruise missiles, which, by the way, is the first truly genuine smart munition, precision guided munition, because they were guided by radar. First, and as a result, you develop this whole missilery. And when you have so many iterations of it, ranging from the intercontinental ballistic missiles to cruise missiles to air defense missiles, that's what you get. You end up having initially in 80s, it was late 70s, I believe, when the first S3 prototypes started to appear. And once S300 came out, it was like, whoa, that's a serious system. And after that, all iterations. But there is another funny thing. There are things which are produced by Almaz-Antey, and there are other S things which are produced by different manufacturers. But Russians call them all S, So S300 PM, for example, which is Antey PMU, it's not produced by the same people who produce S400, for example. So it's kind of mixed. Yeah, I know it's the Russian, Byzantium type of the military industrial complex. So, but yes, it's as a result today, West lags, NATO lags in air defense, and especially anti-ballistic missile defense and anti-hypersonic missile defense, not by generation, by two.
Wow. The first that I really heard of the anti-shipping missiles were when Iran had silkworms. Are you familiar with those? The Chinese silkworm missiles. And they had, I think it was the SSN-22, Sunburned. Were you familiar with that?
Oh, I'm very familiar with that. It's it's P270, which is the Mosquito. Yeah, it's do not forget, 1967 was the shock when Egyptians took Amar class missile boats. You should see those missile boats. Around 38 metric tons of displacement, 2 launchers with their 2 missiles, P-15 Termet, and 1 radar, which is called Rangoat, And so when they go out, 2 of them took off, found on the radar from the 20 miles, their A-LOT, Israeli destroyer in 1967, launched 4 missiles. The thing was gone in no time. And the world took a notice, like, you can do that? Yeah, you can do that. You can go out and launch these standoff weapons. So, and after that, so it's the race started. But again, Russians had a pretty good head-on, not head-on, the advantage already at that time, and they have been running on their own pace. And as a result, today, what you see. And yes, Mosquito, it's a horrifying, even today, it's a horrifying missile. It has a range of about up to 200 kilometers, and it flies at Mach 2.5. But it's not what is important about it. It's before it goes to the terminal, which is terminally, it's a radio horizon, essentially, how it sees there. It flies at around 10, 15 to up to 20 meters over, and people say, oh, no, it's not, sea skimmer. The problem with for this missile is that it begins to violently maneuver at the terminal, about 40 kilometers away from the target. And it's almost impossible to shoot it. And can you imagine the G forces when it maneuvers at Mach 2.5? So the next thing up was, of course, Onyx, which does the same, but latest version of Onyx fly at 1,000 kilometers. They can fly in swarm, as P-700 Granite could do that. And each missile can serve as the head of the swarm. Russians were in the swarm technology since 1977, when the first, my father was part of it, with the first of the Project 949 Oscars. This is one of them, sadly, it's Kursk K-141, which, sunk in 2000. But original, and they're still around, in updated versions of 949, Project 949A, called Oscar 2. They carry some of them carried the P-700 Granite, which is the called SSN-19 shipwreck. It has the range of 600 kilometers, and a single submarine can launch 24 of them. And they can split in groups. One of the missiles could serve as the radar picket. It can pop up several kilometers, sweep with the radar. This is translate data links in 1977 like this, So, and those guys decide what they're gonna attack, what is the most important target, what is the most dangerous target, and things of this nature. So Russians have been into net centricity since actually it was primitive, of course, make no mistake, but since what is called the Echo type submarines, which carried already P6 missiles, they were called, those submarines, the screaming cows. The reason they were called screaming cows because they could launch only from the surface. And when they had this P6 missiles, which of course had the jet engine. So before they launch, those things were actually launched together with the rocket boosters. But before it starts, it had to start its jet engine. And of course, it was screaming. You can imagine. Can you imagine launching several jet fighters simultaneously? That's how it was loud. Obviously, after that, things have been addressed. But this was the thing which Tu-95RC, which is not bomber, but radar picket thing. And you won't believe it. 1959, for example, the first one, I believe, came out. We started this complex, but it was, but you would see it on what is called the argument system of the control of this P6, P35 missiles. The thing would translate to you literally from 300 kilometers, the radar picture. You would pick up this gun, like computer gun, and you would, literally click on the screen, that making what is called the target designation. After that, it was, okay, guys, we're done. So get the hell out of here. Well, of course, by the end of 60s, it was very dangerous. You were essentially, the sitting duck. If you have been launching them, probably less than 100 kilometers away from, let's say, carrier battle group, because they would detect you and they would attack you. They didn't have the real missiles then. They could bomb you,
Right,
but even if you dive and you're successful in diving, you would have, obviously, anti-submarine warfare aircraft already being on the top of you in about 20 minutes. And that would be bad, so you won't be able. Some people manage to do that in the mock-up scenarios, but the point is that's when Russians went for the underwater start with the Malachit P-120, and the first submarine, nuclear power submarine, which was able to do this, was Project 670. And these were, that were just huge improvement, so. And after that, as you see yourself today, hypersonics, all that, it's all a result of the decades of the development of the systems and not relying on aviation only.
Yes, I recall, during the Gulf War and things like that, when they were facing the inferior opponents, and they would say, we have, air supremacy, and they'd go in and they, from day one, they're bombing people who really didn't have much air defense. And so there was an arrogance in the West, in NATO, because they only faced people that didn't have an air defense. There was this arrogance, and they never really faced an air defense of consequence. And it seems to me that once this conflict started, there was some level of shock, because they never had anything to demonstrate how vulnerable that their aircraft were. And when this happened, and then basically the Ukrainians couldn't fly anything, it was just all getting shot down. I think maybe there was a realization in NATO that we are so far behind that if there were a real conflict, we wouldn't be able to successfully fly combat missions, because at this point,
they admit it now. They admit it now. Many, not all. There are still a bunch of morons, and especially armchair generals, who won't believe that they still. But here is the thing. Well, Russia has certainly Air Force as the service, but all of it, including air defense. is unified under the single auspices of the what is called VKS airspace forces. Everything works in, and of course, yeah, it's 21st century. It's all networked. It's all net centricity. It is all completely tied in together. So one thing doesn't happen without another. Unless you are, down and dirty tactical aviation, something like Su-25s, frog foods. What you need, just obviously, as always, the your targeting and navigation system and a night vision goggles, and off you go, down and dirty, and just working on the line of the contact. So but the rest of it, yes, absolutely. And again, I don't know why they decided that, oh my God, we defeated some people, yeah, with no air defense, no functioning air force, no semi-literate army, and like, oh my God, we did so well. Well, yeah, you had half a year to assemble forces, trained, and just before that they were flying for half a year unimpeded, bombing rounds, so softening whatever was there. So, and that's why Russians were like, yeah, we're not buying this. Yeah, sure. It's good PR. No, but point is that in the real war, and again, don't forget, SMO, Special Military Operation, is still not a real war. If that were the real war, there would be no center of Kiev. There would be no political top of Ukraine. It would be gone. But the people don't understand what war entails. There would be very many civilian casualties, like hundreds of thousands, at least, most likely in million or two civilians, not just, So, but many people still do not understand that what we have is still special military operations, and Russians keep Zelensky alive deliberately. Because, the damage this guy and morons in London and Washington, which they do to Ukraine, is unbelievable. Why would you want to, don't interfere with the enemy while it does, makes the mistake, So, and this guy was killing, he was killing the NATO army essentially very beautifully using the Trump's parlance. So, and what can I say?
Well, as an example, this is, almost laughable. The latest, Ukraine ready for immediate ceasefire. The Ukrainian leader has called for the hostilities to be stopped for at least 30 days after a phone call with President Trump. Ukraine is ready for a complete ceasefire right from this moment. Adding, it should include no missile strikes, drone attacks, or hundreds of assaults along the front line. He called on Russia to give an adequate response. Russia said, we will negotiate. But to even start to negotiate, we have certain things that have to be guaranteed that are going to address the long term. And they're just coming back over and over and over. We want a 30-day, and Russia says the same thing. What? So if you've got this guy, I'll put it like this. It seems to me just another public relations thing. So they can do this. We called for a ceasefire, and they know Russia's going to say, we already told you our response. Russia doesn't want a ceasefire. You see, they don't. That's all this is about.
It's all driven by Trump administration. He has loser generals around him. He always does. And you have this clown Kellogg, who won't be allowed to command a battalion in Russian army. And that's what he drives. He's a sore loser. He understands that how out over this all he is. He still believes this BS, which tells you his low professional level. From Kiev regime, which tells you that, they kill 700,000 Russian soldiers a day. They shut down 25,000 aircraft, so Putin is shaking in his boots. Kellogg,
he's dying of Putin's dying of cancer, Alzheimer's, 10 different kind of diseases.
Kellogg is a classic American general, a loser. He never won anything in his life. He lost all his wars. He won't understand the modern warfare. He looks, as I already stated, Russians already stated, we're not going to talk to this guy. Can you imagine Surovikin, for example, let alone Gerasimov talking to Kellogg? He would look at him as on the flea, some mosquito, just the guy doesn't understand. He's not even in the same league. And he is several leagues below. And but yeah, he is, like Trump, that United States defeated everybody, including the Persian Empire and what Egyptians, ancient Egyptians. And fact is, yeah, most Jesus Christ was obviously American. We know that.
Yeah.
And the point is that it became so laughable. They do not understand because they don't have class. They do not teach them properly, ranging from all American or let alone Western military academies. Look at these clowns in London. These are not armed forces. This is a hodgepodge collection of who knows who, Those people won't be able to fight anything, Now you have French, as already stated, to take out their biggest gift from the old time, the independent nuclear deterrent. What do you have? They got their asses handed to them by Africans in Sahel, granted with the help of some people from Russia, but Africans did really well there, So, and these guys are sore losers. So you have sore losers all around. They try to spin it as if they can get some deal. Russians already stated, the United States is a party to the war. It's not the mediator. It's the thing, That's what have started it all, So, and they still believe that anybody will buy the BS. And I don't know, was there any parade of forces which Trump stated that he was supposed to be some parade?
Oh, I think in June or something like that. He's
okay. So sure, yeah. I don't know what he will be parading for, but sure, the United States could have been. And remember, we talked about this with Scott, and about this. United States could have been justifiably the part of this magnificent celebration. Should Washington have been actually cultured, classy, and smart? But because you have essentially probably the biggest concentration of the assholes per square mile in the world right now. So American troops were Russia's big allies. Russians remember fondly, American soldiers, and sacrifices that, names of Eisenhower, Bradley are well known, in Russia. But no, they decided to support Nazis.
Well, I'll put it like
because
this.
Because they lost the right.
I put it like this. Recently, we found out that the America defeated won World War One, won World War II, but for some reason they can't beat the Houthis.
Yeah, that's
you took out the German Wehrmacht, not every division, but for some reason they can't defeat the Houthis. So I don't know. But...
it's a really sad situation, and it's becoming what many Russians and politicians from the top, Maria Zakharova said it, it's panopticon. It's panopticon. It's just, you look at this bunch of the, people without orderlies running this, insanity. I don't know how to, I don't, it's asylum. I mean, pure and simple.
Well, let me throw this at you, Andrei, because there's another important part of warfare, and this is, okay, we're seeing the issue of drones and missiles, the unmanned aerial vehicles, missiles, drones. Let's face it, you could argue we can call them what we want. A drone or a missile are the same thing. It's an unmanned aerial vehicle that can carry a payload. It can be used to do various things. Whatever. Or, okay, that's all it is, and you can have different ways to do it. But there's another element of warfare that we're starting to see, and I think it was a critical issue in the recent loss, I'm going to say this, loss to the Houthis, and that is industrial power. One of the issues with the Houthis, one of the reasons the U.S. had to back down, amongst many, was their bleeding. They're firing a couple of drones. We got to fire $2 million missiles, and we're running out of them. And industrial warfare, you have to be able to continue to produce the things that you need. We had a stockpile of them. Half the stuff, some of it we don't even make anymore. Some of it we only make 400, 500, 600 a year. And now they had to think about this conflict with the Houthis and say, crap, if we keep this up, we're going to run out of stuff. The failure to have the industrial power to maintain your military conflict is, I don't care what you have. I don't care if you have the best stuff. If you run out, you're going to lose. You're naked. And now the US and NATO, the West, is industrially naked.
Yeah, it is. And you're absolutely correct, because in the end, there's are stockpiles. And not stockpiles just for the sake of, oh, we have this much. No, it has to be replenished constantly. So it is essentially, it's the creek which feeds it. Then, yeah, Houthis are not idiots. I mean, they can count. So we say, okay, we have we have 500 cheap drones. Okay, we know they will be shut down. Okay, but even if you calculate this is not even high-level operations. This is almost arithmetics, Oh, okay, we launch this much, we have the percentage of the technical failures of the drones which never make it. Some of them will be defeated by electronic warfare. Others will be shut down. How many? What is the portion? And then, of course, I mean, I'm pretty sure there are people down there who tell Houthis, okay, we have it's called salvo model. And so let's calculate how salvo model, which is not linear, by the way, but yeah. So how many per missile of those drones we need to have, depending on the dynamics of how they empty their, what stocks there of the missiles, and say, oh yeah, we can see now dynamics. Let's play the dynamics, the operation, and they throw things. It's not like people think that, oh, they sit there as a, oh yeah, let's throw 100 drones. No, this is not how it's done. They know which ship is in there. They have their own intel. They know approximately the number of the ammo the ship has from their, I mean, average Arleigh Burke class has 96 cells. VLS, vertical launch system, MK41 cells. They know that about the half or about this payload is there, obviously, the clamps, the tactical Tomahawk land attack missiles. The rest of it is air defense, ranging from SM-3s, which are not designed to shoot down anything other than theoretically some ballistic missile. And then the rest of it is SM-6, which is extremely expensive. It's a good missile to shoot down something like, UAV, aircraft. It may shoot down the subsonic older missile, and they did. So in this respect, they proved it. But how many of them do you have there? Okay, you have what? 2 or 3 Arleigh Burke class. Maybe you have the older Ticonderoga class, so you have 2 Arleigh Burkes, you have Ticonderoga. Okay, so you have roughly 300 cells. 150, subtract from that. Okay, you have what? 150 left of those air defense missiles. Then you have obviously Sea Sparrows, RIM, whatever they have. Obviously, so how many drones do you need? Oh, okay, you need for the operation about 1,000, for example. Okay, and off they go. And the reason that Truman had to maneuver violently when they lost the first F-18 together with the truck, which is tractor, which is because at some point of time they were losing it. They haven't been able to properly shoot it down within the security zone, air defense security zone, which you have for the carrier battle group. So the Truman had to maneuver, which they can. CVN's nuclear-powered carrier, they have this ability to the nuclear reactor to, increase power dramatically in a really short time, and obviously to do those maneuvering. And that's how they lost the first F-18, because evidently something was breaking through. And you always face this problem, which is called the problem of a leaker. Leaker is something which leaks through your air defense zone. And they have to praise the Lord that they deal with Houthis, not with Iranians, for crying out loud. That would have been different story. Iranians have the supersonic anti-shipping missiles with the ranging of very long ranges, So, and when you look at that, the only thing they can have to keep their fingers crossed is that no Onyx, even which is called Yahant, expert version of Onyx is called Yahant. It lacks some critical abilities, but still extremely dangerous. It has the range of 300 kilometers, and it flies at Mach 2.5. And as this Mosquito thing, it begins to maneuver violently at the terminal. That is a completely different game. And then you suddenly have to use everything you got, and you cannot maintain the cohesion, combat cohesion of such a large system as the U.S. Navy's carrier battle group, which is in many respects fragile. Let me put it this way: God forbids, if one missile hits one of the destroyers, you lose half of the air defense, as it happened in 1991 when you had what was the Ticonderoga class, which hit the Mayan during the Persian Gulf War. And carrier battle group was without Aegis air defense cover for almost 20 minutes, because it obviously knocked out the power. And you can look it up. It wasn't Chancellorsville. It was, good Lord, I don't remember the name of the Ticonderoga class cruiser. But yes, you can look it up. And that was a whole panic, Here you have a completely incessant, sustained attacks over and over and over again. And eventually you run low on not only on your missiles, you run lower on your ammo for your guns from the close incoming, these things, Vulcan phalanx. And then suddenly you have the breakdown in the cohesion, because you get tired. You are constantly strained. You're constantly on the tension. You have no way, for example, to go to the rear, as you have, for example, even on the ground warfare. You have rotation. Here, you don't have rotation. You run your watches 24/7. Your people get tired. They are completely, constantly high emotionally. And so as a result, you have this accumulation of this, exhaustion. And then suddenly things begin to break down in terms of the performance of the groups, of the combat groups, which operate with the air defense especially. And guess what? Then suddenly, again, they say it was the tail hook which gave up on this F-18 second one, which again rolled over the board. Even if I think they do not lie necessarily, but this is also another indication. That means what? That operational tempo is such that equipment, hardware begins to give up. And yeah, it's not that he missed. Evidently, they got the arrestor, whatever the first or second one, they got the wire. It was the hook which essentially, I believe, they disintegrated, and essentially, they couldn't stop and they rolled overboard, and that's how they lost the second F-18. Luckily, the pilots ejected, and they say they sustained minor injuries. You will get sustained minor injuries, all right, when you are ejected. The lower back, that's gotta hurt, man. I mean, big time. So there you go. That's what we have. And these are Houthis. God forbid.
If that's the salvo of Onyx, what's now the Onyx? What size warhead does that carry?
They carry up to 350 kilogram. What is called in Russian, it is called the naval mix or maritime mix. It's the high explosive thing, So and consider also that they fly with the speed of at least 2.5 Mach 2.5. So, and we know that kinetic energy also is varies with the square of the velocity. So, and that means, it's
if one of those Arleigh Burkes get hit by an Onyx, how much?
It's probably gonna, if it's not gonna sink, it's gonna be damaged horrendously. And it, God forbids, of course, that it will knock out the power. It will kill very many people. It will start fires and things like that. And yeah, some people say that to sink Arleigh Burke, you need 2 Onyxes. Sink that it will break up and will sink. So, and we better not find out, obviously.
No. Is Kinjal an anti-shipping? Kinjal, is that an anti-shipping?
It has anti-shipping capability. it can hit maneuvering targets. And yeah, Kinjal, no, Kinjal, if that thing flies into, you do not want to be on anything smaller than aircraft carrier. Two Kinjals probably gonna sink aircraft carrier. One Kinjal, it's just gonna pulverize anything on the about the size of Arleigh Burke, which is about 10,000 metric tons. I mean, full load and full displacement. So, and then you have to keep in mind, they can penetrate deep into the stores. If it hits the store,
Yeah.
good Lord, I mean, it's gonna be another, you know what, another cruiser hood, HMS hood, which will sink in 3 seconds, you know, so that's what it's going to be. So, and that's the danger. And Kinjal can penetrate anything, but yeah, God forbid, when you have also the aircraft carrier, which has the nuclear heart, essentially, you know, you don't want that thing to, good Lord, you know, just so, and that is why I always advocate for peace and peaceful resolution of things. But the point is, the modern warfare is horrendous, and hypersonic. Well, just to give you example, if you have Mach 10, you know, so you have the kinetic energy apart from the mass, which
Right.
multiplies it even more, and apart from explosives, which you have, for example, between Kinjal and Harpoon, just on the velocity alone, you will have the kinetic energy of Kinjal 100 times more, 10 squared, and then you multiply it by mass, which will be about almost 10 times more. So you multiply it by another. So by the time that thing flies in, you would probably have, 100 times, 1,000 times more strength of the impact without just explosives. With explosives, God help us all, you know. So, and that's what is the most horrifying. The same goes for Zircon, but Zircon is the, 3M22. It is Onyx on the steroids with this ramjet, and who knows how you still cannot see, they fog it. The head itself looks like it's, and yeah, Mach 10, 3 tons of Onyx. Oh, good Lord.
Well, now, what's the difference between Zircon and Kinjal?
Kinjal is aeroballistic missile. It's accelerated by the MiG-31K, and now you can shoot it from, and already have been done, Su-34. That's the whole other can of worms you're opening here. And it boosts itself into the probably above Mach 10, probably somewhere, I don't know, Mach 11, 12. And then it slows down, flying under the just basically inertia through the lower layers of atmosphere. It maneuvers violently. So by the time it hits the target, it's probably about Mach 7 or 8. Still, good Lord. But Zircon is a powered flight through and through. You launch it from the what is called 3S-14 VLS vertical launch system on any Russian frigate. It hits the power and flies 1,500 kilometers with constantly working engine. And so that means what? When it flies in, it's Mach 10 plus, it doesn't lose any, there's no burnout speed or anything. It just flies like that, and it maneuvers like violently, and essentially it actually attacks downward. So essentially it attacks vertically. So if it hits you even one of them, you're pretty much done, because
it's going to go right through the deck.
Yeah, it's going to tear. Yeah, that's what it is. One is enough, because it will basically tear apart your bottom, of the ship. And if it is something larger than even, let's put it this way, 1.5 by 1.5 meters, hole, you're already not going to be able to. You will have to be able to immediately shut down everything in terms of your bulkheads, the watertight bulkheads. That's the only way. But when the thing tears out something like 15 meters by 30, 30 meters by 15 meters, it's over. You're just gonna go down like in 3 seconds, and nothing you can do about it. So yeah, it's a basic theory of the survivability of the ship. So that is why it is a horrifying weapon, and the same goes for Kinjal. And that's why any ship within this category of the cruiser is not survivable. It cannot survive the hypersonic strike. Aircraft carrier will have probably more time, but if you have two of them flying in, that's not going to work out well either. Because even aircraft carrier being such a gigantic machine, if you have your, just gigantic hole the size of the basketball court torn out from your bottom, it's over, man. It's done.
What about how much do we know about the Oreshnik? How much do we know about it? I know that there's, it hit that Yushmash, that they've never let any pictures come out. I did see some pictures that I guess were supposedly from a distance, and you just saw streaks of light coming down. Mm-hmm. I guess that was the Oreshnik. I don't know. That's what supposedly have been the Oreshnik, but they've never let any pictures get out of the area that it struck. How much do we know about it now?
Well, Larry immediately called me after like, dude, it's a game changer. They are in shock because, it's a it's a hypersonic maneuvering blocks, and that's what Russian armed forces from Navy to are being rearmed essentially. For example, the latest versions of Bulava intercontinental ballistic missile, they also carry all kinds of the maneuvering hypersonic blocks. But the bizarre thing about Oreshnik is that's the whole other level. The temperature at the warhead, and this I'm quoting the Russian president, and Mr. Putin never sells BS. If he said it, it's up to 5,000 degrees Celsius. It's about the temperature of the surface of the sun, slightly less. So when you have those things which fly in, and evidently single warhead, Oreshnik has 6, and each of the warheads can split in other 6. So a single missile can carry 36 multiple independent re-entry vehicles which are maneuvering, and the impact, that thing can melt anything on the earth, let alone for it to penetrate deep into the ground. 5,000 degrees, I mean, it's like you get the piece of sun and throw in, they say it's Mach 10. I doubt it. I think so it's higher. I think Mach 10, it's what it gets by the time it hits the target. Most likely it accelerates to higher than that, but don't forget, again, burnout speed for the ballistic missiles. They are not powered constantly. They have to have the boost phase, and then they fly in, and then burnout speed probably higher than Mach 10, but I think so what we saw, that is why they're not showing any photos of Yuzhmash, because it's
that's pretty much an entire base.
They just freaking killed the whole damn thing. Especially, what is the most important? It's not even on the top. Most of it was evacuated long time before. These were underground facilities of the Yuzhmash, which in the Soviet times have been designed to such a way that it can withstand, which most of them are aerial nuclear explosion up to 150 kilotons. That was actually designed to withstand something which would go through the first versions of the Trident missile. So, and it could withstand up to 1 megaton, depending on the radius away from there. So, but yeah, it was designed to withstand nuclear weapons. And Oreshnik penetrated it and just absolutely killed everything what was down there, So they still have some parts which are kind of, it's gone. And that is why they're not publishing any photographs. They don't want to. Russians say, we know, but the Russians are waiting for fakes, like, oh yeah, they photoshopped, everything is fine, everything is back. Show me. And that's what Russia says. Show us, hey, come on. I mean, United States has such a wonderful, optronic assets. Why don't you show us? Of course, they're not going to show it. You know why? Not because they they do not want to disclose capability. Everybody knows United States has excellent optronic, optical, ISR, and so show us at least, further away. Like where is the, this, 1 mile by mile, the thing? It's gone, and okay, we'll wait for another year, I guess. But and there was a reason why they immediately cornered it off, and people were complaining that their houses were shaking like there was an earthquake, because obviously internal explosions, and yeah, they killed a lot of people there. There's no doubt about it. And so yeah, Dnipropetrovsk was shaken, and they have even today, a mile away, the houses have the cracks because of the seismic impact. So
effectively, what you have with the Oreshnik is, near, or at least you're approaching the kinetic energy of nuclear.
Oh, more. I mean, yeah, people have to understand what many people do not understand. There are 2 parameters of the nuclear weapons. One of them, TNT equivalent. Okay, yeah. So like, oh yeah, 150 kilotons. Okay, we know what we have. Let's say Trident 2 D5. One of the each of the warhead is up to 200 kilotons. That means 200,000 tons of TNT. But the second and most important characteristic of the nuclear weapon is its might. In Russian, it's called могущество. It's the amount of the actual damage it can deal, and that's the whole thing. You in the nuclear war, God forbids, you would have to have, for example, if the Soviet Union and United States went, God forbids, for the war, you have this huge mash, and of course it goes immediately, and it was already operating then underground into those bunkers. I mean, several stories down below. So in order for you to even break through, you had to have several very accurately positioned warheads in order to approach there what is might, which can deal appropriate damage. Here, what you have 36 warheads, which have no explosives whatsoever, no nuclear. They just flew in, and that was it. It's just because what you had is, in terms of might, but yeah, high precision weaponry already, in terms of the tactical and operational impact, started to approach tactical nukes long time ago. But that is why, for example, the general public doesn't like those nuclear weapons and things like, understandably, which is absolutely understandable. But that's why they wanted. Russians have to go and do the tactical nukes against Ukrainians. They wanted it because obviously, and Russians will say, we don't need tactical nukes. We can do it without it. And once Oreshnik had been used, that completely shut it down, this discussion about it, because obviously, which was developed specifically to actually to convince Russians that they need to use tactical nukes with all this BS, selling to the Western public. But after Oreshnik, it's like, why do we need nukes? We can do it without nukes. So yeah, and just for people to understand, it's high precision weapon, and that's why people now begin to understand. Russians do not need to start war in Europe. What they can do, they can destroy all ports where United States theoretically could have landed any kind of the support, and Europe will die out on its own. And it's not going to be any nuclear weapons. Even if you take a look at those miles of the pier, where you can park your, basically, moor your ship, especially strategic prepositioning force, you don't have to have nukes anymore. It's enough to fly in any hypersonics, let alone Oreshnik. Single Oreshnik probably will take out the port of Rotterdam, just it's going to be gone. Bremenhaven, no problem, and no, radioactive, pollution or anything, no people, no mass casualties, no nothing.
Everything. What kind of range does the Oreshnik have?
5,500 kilometers. And that means I have a vested interest, because
They can
if
hit the
we look
West
at
Coast
that,
from inside of Russian airspace, can't they?
oh yeah. Anyway, Europe completely covered. Now, single Oreshnik. Well, if Oreshnik is put on Chukotka, which is Pacific, the Far East, it covers pretty much half of the United States up to California and all position areas of the strategic nuclear forces of the United States, which are located, of course, in Nebraska, North Dakota, and Wyoming. So it's just simple as that. And again, you don't need to have nuclear weapons anymore. You can do it this way.
Well, wow. Well, thank you very much. Certainly appreciate your time, Andrei. I've learned a lot, and sometimes people talk. We talk endlessly about every other week. The Trump's calling for a ceasefire, and then he says we're getting out. Oh, we've had enough. Oh, wait a minute. I think we're almost. That stuff gets old, but it's good to learn. To get you one to learn a lot about the hardware involved, and I say this, because it's like everybody's saying the U.S. is going to attack Iran. I don't believe it. I keep saying I don't think so, because if you look at Iran's potential, their military potential, if the planners at the Pentagon are looking at Iran's military potential, they're looking up what happened last year when Iran was able to attack Israel. They have to be saying to the president, look, if Iran wants to, they can really.
U.S. will sustain horrendous casualties through all bases in there. And that's where Scott may have a point. United States conventionally is not very strong, actually. And it's very highly nuclear weapon biased nation. So United States doesn't have this multiple steps, multiple rungs or the ladder to escalate. It has one step.
It's getting to the point, to me, where that's the U.S.'s only option.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. It's getting to the point that because the U.S. it conventionally is, you're losing to the Houthis at this point. Who are you going to go up against conventionally when you're up against Yemen and they run you out of the Red Sea? At that point, you're not an effective fighting force in modern warfare. Literally, you're not an effective fighting force in modern warfare, technologically.
As I said all the time, TOE, Table of Organization and Equipment, TOE for the U.S. Armed Forces is stuck in 1990. It's 35 years obsolete now. And that's what they never understood. And yes, in terms of Iran, and don't forget, Iranians will know what is getting ready, how is getting ready. They will have early warning. Okay, we know that, right? There is the country to the north of Iran, across the Caspian Sea, called Russia. So they will tell them. And and they have their own means to fight. And so that's why I'm afraid that if, God forbids, and I agree with you, that U.S. military understands that. Those people, especially those colonels who do this, operations, they say, you guys have to be freaking crazy, to do that. But that's the very hair trigger type thing. Because once it goes on, the response comes against Israel and U.S. Bases, and it's going to be massive. And it's going to be, a lot of American casualties. United States has the only way of going to nuclear.
Because it's lost the war. At that point, it has lost the war. Once you determine that your enemy can strike you at will and you don't have a decent... Right now, I know we have to go, but I'll say this. We can go back to the beginning of this conversation. If you don't have adequate air defense in this day and age, you can't even fight a war. You can't fight a war if you don't have adequate air defense. And it's pretty clear the U.S. does not have adequate air defense.
Yeah. Bases, you remember, they even warned them after they attacked. Remember, after Trump assassinated General Soleimani, they gave him 24 hours to get out. They never used any air defense. You know why? Because it was useless. It wouldn't intercept anything. As we saw Israel Well, guess what? Israeli air defense and anti-missile defense is American one. It has the made in Israel Rafale, it's all Boeing and Raytheon. That's what it is. All those slingshots, David Sling, or those other types of missiles, they're all made in the United States primarily, with some twist for the
Well,
East.
it sure can't stop the Houthi missiles from hitting the airport. So
No,
one missile, the Houthis don't even fire a salvo; they fire one, and that gets.
they have Thaad, and they have Thaad there, which is supposed to be, and they have the excellent radar. Thaad has the race, but how they missed it, I mean, it's just like, wow, So.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Well, don't forget, everybody, the one Reminiscence of the Future. That's Andrei's very important blog. And of course, Smoothie X12. That is his YouTube. He's got a great YouTube channel. So make sure you check that out and don't miss anything. And he has Buy Me a Coffee and all of that. So if you go to Reminiscence of the Future, you can click right on Buy Me a Coffee. And please donate to make sure Andrei is able to continue his very important work. And he's got great books. I would recommend, if you enjoyed this conversation, you'll probably look through his books, and you'll probably find some that you'll find very, very interesting. They're available. You can click right there and get them. Thanks a lot, Andrei. Thanks a lot, everybody. Make sure, if you look, everything scrolling across the bottom, follow me on Rumble and Rockfin and all that kind of stuff. And share this on all your social media platforms. We're out.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks a lot.